Operating any mechanical equipment within the workplace requires that staff have adequate training meeting the health and safety at work requirements. Around 1,300 UK employees are hospitalized each year with serious injuries following lift truck accidents, and that number is rising. That's 5 UK workers each workday suffering debilitating and life-changing injuries, including complex fractures, dislocations, degloving and amputations. Accidents don't just happen, they are caused. 8 out of 10 accidents are human error, not mechanical failure. 9 out of 10 accidents are avoidable. The Health and Safety at Work Act 1974. The Health and Safety Information for Employees Regulations 1989 requires employers to either display the HSE-approved law poster or to provide each of their workers with the equivalent leaflet. It outlines responsibilities of employers and employees. Gives details of responsible persons, and details of who to contact if there are any safety issues that have not been resolved. The Health and Safety at Work Act 1974 places duties on the employer under Section 2, the employee under Section 7 and 8, and everyone at any place of work. Your employer has a duty under law to ensure, so far as is reasonably practical, your health, safety and welfare at work. In general, your employer's duties include making your workplace safe and without risks to health, ensuring plant and machinery are safe and that safe systems of work are set and followed, ensuring articles and substances are moved, stored and used safely, providing adequate welfare facilities, give you the information, instruction, training, and supervision necessary for your health and safety. As an employee, you have legal duties too. They include taking reasonable care for your own safety and that of others, who may be affected by what you do or do not do. Cooperating with your employer on health and safety. Correctly using work items provided by your employer, including personal protective equipment, in accordance with training or instructions. Not interfering with or misusing anything provided in the interests of your health and safety or welfare. Sanctions for breaches of safety at work regulations. Fines, employer or employee. Prison, unlimited sentence. Personal liability claim a possibility. Enforcement of health and safety regulations. Who's responsible? Employer, having an effective supervision. HSE inspector. An inspector's role is to investigate when accidents have happened or a complaint is made whether people are at risk, to find out if something has gone wrong. An EHO environmental health officer. There are more regulations every company must follow. One of them is Provision and Use of Work Equipment Regulations 1998. These regulations, often abbreviated to PUR, place duties on people and companies who own, operate, or have control over work equipment. PUR also places responsibilities on businesses and organizations whose employees use work equipment, whether owned by them or not. Under Section 9 of PUR, every employer shall ensure that all persons who use work equipment have received adequate training for the purposes of health and safety. Supervision must have received adequate training to effectively manage safe use of equipment. Employers should not allow anyone to operate even occasionally, unless successfully trained and tested on that type of truck. The only exception is for those receiving training under adequate supervision of qualified instructor. And under Section 3, The same requirement is placed on the self-employed, contractors, lorry drivers and temporary workers. PUA requires that equipment provided for use at work is suitable for the intended use, safe for use, maintained in a safe condition and inspected to ensure it is correctly installed and does not subsequently deteriorate. Used only by people who have received adequate information, instruction, and training. Accompanied by suitable health and safety measures, such as protective devices and controls. These will normally include guarding, emergency stop devices, adequate means of isolation from sources of energy, clearly visible markings and warning devices. Used in accordance with specific requirements, for mobile work equipment and power presses. Some work equipment is subject to other health and safety legislation in addition to PUA. For example, lifting equipment must also meet the requirements of LOLA Lifting Operations and Lifting Equipment Regulations 1998. LOLA requires that all lifting operations involving lifting equipment must be properly planned by a competent person, appropriately supervised and carried out in a safe manner. LOLA also requires that all equipment used for lifting is fit for purpose, appropriate for the task, suitably marked and, in many cases, subject to statutory periodic, thorough examination. Records must be kept of all thorough examinations and any defects found must be reported to both the person responsible for the equipment and the relevant enforcing authority. PUA is optional for pedestrian low-level trucks, but stacker trucks must comply. LOLA is supported by the Safe Use of Lifting Equipment, Approved Code of Practice. Shorter. ACOP. Is an ACOP a legal requirement? ACOP is approved by the Health and Safety Executive, with the consent of the Secretary of State. It gives practical advice on how to comply with the law. If you follow the advice, you will be doing enough to comply with the law in respect of those specific matters on which the code gives advice. Simpler, it's an advice to duty holders on how to comply with health and safety law. You do not have to comply with ACOP, however, if you do not and a breach occurs, you will need to prove that your actions were as good if not better than the ACOP. Operators Safety Code. The following rules apply to all operators of lift trucks. Only operate if you are trained. Operator must read or use manufacturer's handbook whenever there is a need for it. Pre-shift checks must be carried out. Charging must be done at charging points or designated areas. Every lift truck operator must comply with the highway code. You must not carry passengers. Always observe your speed limits and remember, you are your speed limit. Report all accidents immediately. Report all defects immediately. Wear spectacles if required. Don't operate if feeling unwell or tired. Look out for danger. Face in direction of travel. You should always lead your truck. Allow 3 truck lengths for braking. Never exceed the truck's capacity. Avoid sudden movements. Look before you move off. The last thing the operator should do before moving off is observation. Sound horn at doorways, end of aisles, blind corners, etc. Do several short blasts. Make sure you are aware of what is the highest point of your truck. Watch overhead clearances. Secure truck before operating forks. Make sure your load is safe and secured. On slopes, without a load, face downhill. On slopes, with a load, face uphill. Keep aisleways clean. Never walk under or over the forks. Never lift people on the forks. Keep forks low, for 6 inches or 100-150 mm from the floor. Insert forks fully into load. Lift with mast vertical. Never push or bump loads. Park trucks with forks on the floor. Remove keys from parked trucks to prevent unauthorized use. Be aware of ramps. On ramps, always straight up or down. Watch for pedestrians. It's the pallet truck operator's responsibility to ensure the safety of pedestrians while operating a truck. Look before you reverse. Keep limbs inside the cab. Never demount a truck whilst it is moving. Stop fully, observe and then safely demount. Check bridge plates. Never use defective pallets. Rated capacity plate. What is a rated capacity plate? By law, any vehicle that moves, lifts, and transports people or loads must have an identification plate on it. If we look at our cars, for example, we will find a VIN plate on it giving details of the vehicle. On a lift truck, this plate is called a capacity plate. It must be visible and preferably within the view of the operator whilst he is operating the truck under normal conditions. If there is no capacity plate on the lift truck, then the operator is not allowed to operate it, even on an occasional basis. It can only be put on a lift truck by the manufacturer. The maximum rated capacity the truck can pick up is tested with the mast vertical and on level ground. As this training covers not only pedestrian pallet movers, but stacker trucks as well, we have to cover particular one: pedestrian counterbalance pallet stacker. What exactly a pedestrian counterbalance stacker is and what it does. The counterbalance stacker is the preferred type of lifting machine when a forklift is either not needed, when there is limited room to store a forklift, or when it is to be used as an alternative to a forklift in the small storeroom or warehouse. In the simplest of terms, the walkie counterbalance stacker is a machine that you walk behind and operate to lift and move pallets and other materials at a set height. The counterbalance weights are used instead of front or back legs, as on the other movers or stackers, to steady the machine, meaning that it doesn't need load arms. Principles of counterbalance. The counterbalance truck features two forks at the front and has the ability to drive up close to a load to pick it up and move it. The name comes from the counterweight in the rear of the vehicle. This is to compensate for the heavy load being lifted at the front. If you place a load of equal weight on each side of the seesaw at an equal distance away from the fulcrum point, is exactly balanced. Now, if you move one of the weights closer to the center of the seesaw, what will happen? This is how the load center on the counterbalance trucks works. If you place more weight on one of the side of the seesaw at an equal distance away from the fulcrum point, it will act different. Because the weight is greater on one of the side, the force pushing down is greater, thus keeping it on the ground. The load center represents the tipping point for a forklift truck. Essentially, a load center is the middle of a counterbalance truck's load, when measured from the front face of the fork arms to the center of the load, center of gravity of the load. Now let's look at a counterbalance truck and how the seesaw effect plays an important part. If you weighed the truck from the fulcrum point forward, then from the fulcrum point backwards, you would have two different weights. Therefore, because the weight is greater on the rear of the truck, the force pushing down is greater, thus keeping the rear wheels on the ground. Center of gravity. Every lift truck has a center of gravity, as you can see on the slide. And every load also has a center of gravity. So when the lift truck picks up a load, these two centers of gravity combine to make one combined center of gravity. Most counterbalanced forklifts have a 3-point suspension system, meaning that the truck is supported at the 2 front wheels and the center of the steer axle. If you imagine all 3 points connected into a triangle, this is the forklift stability triangle. When the lift truck center of gravity falls within the perimeter of this triangle, a load is safe to carry. The traditional model of the forklift stability triangle is useful, but it leaves out one important thing: 3-dimensional space. In actual fact, the stability triangle is a pyramid. Now, when there is no load present, the lift truck center of gravity is firmly inside the triangle. Because there is no load, the center of gravity is nearly in the center of the forklift's counterbalance. As you add weight to the forks, the center of gravity shifts closer to the front axle. Once the center of gravity reaches the front axle, it is at the edge of the stability triangle, and the load becomes unsafe to carry. A counterbalanced truck can overturn sideways or tip over if the center of gravity leaves the stability triangle on any sides. However, by keeping loads well within the bounds of the stability triangle, they can keep their truck steady even when unforeseen conditions require sudden braking, turning, or accelerating. Stability. Can you identify ways operator could cause instability? Let's have a look at some. For example, turning at speed, driving too fast. Load not centralized, forks not in the middle. Floor or ground conditions. Floor obstructions. Potholes. Turning across a slope. Live loads and more. This presentation has covered the basics of safe operation of the pedestrian-operated lift truck. It has been designed as a training aid to help lift truck operators better understand how to operate safely and efficiently. What training can't do is to make you a safe operator by itself. All operators of lift trucks should be properly trained by an accredited instructor to become safe and efficient operator. You must remember your training and apply this in your everyday work. Remember, always concentrate on what you are doing, observe everyone and everything around you. Look around before moving off. Always look in the direction of travel. Look up and make sure you have a sufficient clearance for any overhead obstacles. When approaching blind corner, slow down, drive slowly, be ready to stop and sound the horn to let the other people know that you are there. Stay in control, keep at least one of your hands on controls. Travel at the speed suitable to the conditions. Avoid sudden stops and making sharp turns. Keep a minimum of separation gap of 3 truck lengths for the braking. Remember, it's your responsibility to remove any debris on the floor or on your way. Stop, park safely and remove it. Remember the main reasons of this training. Be safe, look after yourself and everything, and everyone around you. Always remember, think before you do anything.